If we consider the largely unknown and dark depths of our ocean as our closest alien world, then it's likely our first contact will be with whales. I'm Dawn Nakagawa, the president of the Berggruen Institute in Los Angeles, and this is Futurology. For centuries, we treated whales as a commodity, prized mostly as fuel before the age of electricity. Just 50 years ago, an LP record of their mournful songs seeped quickly into human consciousness and spurred a vast paradigm shift in how we think about animals and ecology. From a theory of mind perspective, it seems a settled matter that whales think, and now we may have the tools to figure out whether they speak in any way that would be recognizable to us. If so, can we decode and translate their songs? And if we could, should we assume that they even want to talk to us? David Gruber has spent his career trying to see through other eyes and listen through other ears. Today, he leads Project SETI. The C stands for Cetacean, an effort to decode the clicks and codas of sperm whales. Each whale song is both a data set and a poem. With machine learning and patient listening, we're starting to hear them not as noise, but as language. The director of our Future Humans program, Claire Webb, talked to David about what it means to treat whale song as a rehearsal for contact with another intelligence. And now, David Gruber and Claire Webb on Futurology.
I'm so delighted to be with you, Dr. David Gruber.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Dr. Webb.
So, David, it seems to me that you've always had a rebellious spirit. So why don't you tell me how that manifested in your childhood?
So when I first got interested in animals, I was just I was growing up in northern New Jersey, and there wasn't nature as one would imagine it. There was like a river in my town that was a super fun site, and there was like a chemical company that was right there, and but I just liked ants that were outside the house, and that just I remember as the first thing is just like pulling back the soil a little bit and like seeing ants and watching them move and watching how they interact. But I think I was just more obsessed with like these tiny little things that are living these very complicated lives. And I guess I would say that I felt it was easier to study ants than it was to like interact with people at that point.
So how did you become a marine biologist? From the ants to marine wildlife. Tell me about that.
Becoming a marine biologist, I went to the University of Rhode Island, but at that time I didn't know what I wanted to do, or I didn't even really know, but I like surfing. So there was a good oceanography department there, and that was just like a first in of like studying the ocean, so I could learn where the waves are going to break, and then I actually did I guess it was an undergraduate honor thesis with a professor. His name was Howard Wynn, and had these whale spectrograms. And my undergraduate honors thesis was on the whales, and he had a trailer in the back of the University of Rhode Island Graduate School of Oceanography, where there was just like reams of whale recordings. And I was kind of in the process of just looking at these, not doing any science, when I got invited by him to go to Belize on a trip. His graduate student got sick. So meanwhile, like I don't have any background in marine biology, but I was filling in for a graduate student. And when we got to this island, Tobacco Key, he just kind of let me do this work, and we were doing Earthwatch. And I was just kind of trying to pick up what this graduate student was doing, which was following fish at night. And we would put little light sticks on the fish and then see them schooling during the day and then watching what they did at night. But this was amazing because it was like I was this kid from New Jersey that had never been to a coral reef, and now I was spending like 15 hours a day in the water. But I think it was more the observing, the same thing like the ants, like because I was in the same water every day, like I would see like, oh, there's an octopus under this hole. And at like 5:00, this group of fish are going to like pass through. And I don't know, I just felt like that, it was just amazing, and
You became an intimate observer of this hyperlocal coral reef and its inhabitants.
exactly.
So this experience that you had really made an impact on you, and those experiences you continue to seek out. So can you tell me a little bit about what's so enchanting about the ocean, and how you kind of made the professional leap to devote your life to the study of marine animals?
I think I had a bit of an existential crisis as a kid. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was convinced that the world was, that the future was just really grim. And I just remember actually I just remember this conversation my mom had with me, where like, you should do environmental science. You should dedicate your career to studying nature. That's what she saw that I was good at. And
Moms
I think
are always right.
Yeah. But I think I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like and it was because as a kid, I'm in a polluted environment. Like, I didn't know that was my whole world at the time. So I think it was so impactful to like be on this remote tropical reef, and being out in the water and being under the water with the creatures. And but it was very like low tech. Like, I even had a cement block as my anchor, and I had a little tiny boat with a little 6 horsepower engine that I'd have to kind of paddle through the reef and then put the engine down. And there was there was a conch fisherman on the island that was about my age, and was amazing breath holding, because they're diving up and down to get conch. And we each had our tents. Like, I was living in a tent that I put like a little mattress inside the tent because I was staying there long term. And would wake up in the morning, the first thing, my tent would start getting so hot, I would just run off the front of the pier and dive into the water, and then get this little boat and have these stations where I was studying the fish. And I think it was just heaven. Like, this was like the life I wanted to live. And yeah, and that was like, I think, a commitment to the ocean.
So bioluminescence is this amazing property of some living creatures. Through stimulation, they produce light on their own, which is amazing. So can you tell us about like the scientific way that happens, and what it's useful for from an evolutionary perspective?
I mean, it's interesting now because we look at bioluminescence and we look at it like at 2025, like, oh, it's all these animals like fireflies, like making light. But you have to like trace this all the way back to like, what was the first bioluminescent animal like, and why do they make it? And bioluminescence basically means that they call it cold light, and they're mixing like a luciferin and a luciferase, and the luciferin is like the fuel, and the luciferase is like the catalyst, and it's like a spark plug, like give it burning. And it burns. So it's actually burning, but instead of giving off heat, it gives off photons. And in one sense, like, it's giving off photons in visible light. But there's like blue bioluminescence, and there's green bioluminescence, and there's even red bioluminescence. And if you trace it back, there's like bacteria that do bioluminescence. And the original thinking is it was more metabolic. So it was a huge catastrophe in the world when oxygen started coming about. Like, there was like an oxygen holocaust because everybody was anaerobes. And then all of a sudden these cyanobacteria are like blipping off all this oxygen, and they've, now it's already reacted with all the reduced iron in the ocean, and it's starting to accumulate.
And this is when cyanobacteria incorporated chlorophyll.
Yes.
Into their beings. And life as we know it on this planet it would be so alien. It would be these anaerobic life forms. It wouldn't be us, like breathing air. Respiration is really different than anaerobic processes of conversion.
Exactly. And it's actually not that long that it started to climb up. Like, we're at 21% oxygen now, but that's more of a recent thing. But you need that 21% for there to be like placental mammals and larger things. But back to the bacteria, when the oxygen came about, like, that's why we UV, like, oh, it's an antioxidant. the early hypothesis is that bioluminescence was an antioxidant, and it would scavenge radical oxygens.
Wow.
And because it requires oxygen to burn bioluminescence in it, so it would take up and detoxify. But then eyesight, coming about in like in the Cambrian,
photosensitivity.
Things have eyes.
Yeah.
Things have eyes that are seeing in the same wavelength as plants are able to photosynthesize, between like 400 and 700 nanometers. So light was given off in that range. And then it had this massive radiation in fish. Like, for instance, in fish, it's like there's been like over 100 independent evolution of bioluminescence on land. And it's just become like many different things. Some are using it for like, there's sacrificial bioluminescence where it'll make like, something will break off and it'll deter a predator because it'll think that it's chasing after this bioluminescent thing, but it's a piece of it that fell off. It can make a smoke screen. They're using it for mating. There's the anglerfish that like, uses it a lure. It's like, it's a major component of especially deep sea life. Like over 70% of animals in the deep sea have this ability to produce their own light.
Wow. That seems like a lot.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. Because you're in the dark. Imagine we're in the dark. Like right now, we're shining all these bright lights on us, and our eyes have these opsin proteins, right, that are absorbing the light from the sun. But you go underwater, and like even just a few meters underwater, it's getting darker. You're losing like the red photons very quickly. It's very much just blue at 50 meters. You're down at 700 meters underwater, and there's no light whatsoever. They never see a photon from the sun. So with the average depth of the ocean being like 4 kilometers, like there's this massive amount of real estate on our planet that never gets any photon from our star.
And it's amazing that, so we think of the planet as being covered mostly by oceans. We learn that, but we tend to forget that it's also the depth of the ocean is this other dimension of stuff that we don't know about. It's not just surface area. Yeah.
Partially because it's been hard to access for us.
Yeah.
Like if we think of plants, like humans have been on land for a good long while. So we've had time to learn which plants to eat and not. But entering the deep sea for us is like going back, like not even really a century.
So what's the difference between bioluminescence and biofluorescence?
So bioluminescence is when light is made. Like the animal makes a photon of light. So firefly is a great example. Like there's actual light coming out of the firefly, and biofluorescence is different in that it actually needs light to stimulate it. It's like, think of a black light or one of those posters where you need to shine UV light on it.
Or like stars in kids' bedrooms that you have to do a flashlight at?
Those are different too. Those are, okay. Anyway, those are ones that actually absorb the light and then slowly emit it back out. That's phosphorescence. But fluorescence is more like, so the paint, as soon as you take the UV light away from like a fluorescent poster, it goes away. So it's not like actually making any of its own light, but it's absorbing some of the light and then giving it off as a lower energy. So it's absorbing the UV light, which you can't see, and then it's giving it off in a visible spectrum. In the ocean, it got us thinking, like, so much real estate in the ocean is just blue, like the blue ocean, and it's all blue. And if you're an animal swimming in the ocean, you're mainly living in a blue world. And so what does that mean to the animals in the ocean? Like their eyes are different. Their world is different. They don't have this nice Roy G. Biv colors that we have on land. So their eyes have changed differently. So one of the things we started to see is that there's a huge amount of fluorescence specifically tuned for blue light. So like I'll be swimming on a reef, there'll be a coral like way beyond where there's any red. And that coral, I'm swimming and I see it and it's red. So what it was doing is absorbing the blue light, but it's actually making a protein that is absorbing the blue light and giving off red light. So it's making red light in a place where there doesn't exist.
Wow.
And it's giving color to that
Wow.
part of the world.
When was the first time you experienced bioluminescence?
Oh man, probably it was in Belize, because that was really the first time I was like even on a coral reef.
And what is it? Like, how did you see it?
Because I would be following the fish at night. So imagine that this would be an average day. Like first a day, like I was working on a fish called a blue stripe grunt.
Okay. Not as bad as daddy long legs, but you guys like
the blue stripe grunt.
Yeah. Okay.
When you take them out of the water, they make grunting noise. And they have blue stripes on them.
Very literal.
Right. And so I'm studying blue stripe grunt, but they're, together in the reef, and I would try to like get one or few of them and put little light sticks on them. And then this was the cool thing, is that the word crepuscular, which is a favorite word, at that transition between day and night, that kind of dim, dusky period, they start getting kind of agitated, and then you could almost set your clock to it, that like at the exact moment as the light level hits the right photon flux, they all disperse at once, and all the blue stripe grunts disperse and go into the reef, and they go into the seagrass and they feed. And then in the morning, this was harder because it was easier to like be in the water at dusk, but then in the morning they come together again and they school again in the morning. And so I would be in the water at night, right as the crepuscular time was coming, and then they would dart off, and I'd find the one that had the light stick on them, and I'd stay with them and write. I mean, again, I'm an undergraduate, and I wasn't really being trained, so I was doing what I thought a marine biologist should do, which was just taking notes on an underwater notepad of like drawing lines and things. I mean, everything I did was nonsense and nothing was publishable. So I was just living out my fantasy of what a marine biologist should be doing, which was taking, having a compass underwater and kind of just showing the direction that the various fish were going into the seagrass. And I would like just follow them as long as I could. Sometimes I followed them for like several hours. And I was just watching, what they were doing. And they're just, they're in the seagrass and just observing. And then like one night, I pop my head up, and it's like literally probably like 3-4 hours have gone by. And this blue stripe grunt took me like way off the island. I could see this little island as this tiny little thing in the backdrop. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Was that scary?
I think so, because I didn't realize like how far. I was just following this fish. And then it took me like way offshore. And I saw the island, through the moonlight. I could just see this kind of silhouette of the island. And I started just swimming towards it. But I started like psyching myself out thinking about sharks.
Well, as someone from the Midwest, I have a total fear of sharks, which I know is overblown, but I'm with you. I'm scared with you telling the story.
Well, I think the more I thought about it, the more I like got myself scared.
Yeah.
But then there was also another night where there was a group of ostracods, and they literally look like little sesame seeds, and they have these little nozzles on them, like one gives off luciferin, and they'll come out of the sand, and they'll shoot to the surface, and they'll leave these little blops of blue light, and this will go on for like a while, and it's part of a mating ritual about whoever puts on the best light show.
Girls love that.
And so this was another night of like just like magic. It was like being an avatar. And I think I started to really like being in the water at night, and unlike bioluminescence.
And you have discovered, you and your colleagues, over 180 species of biofluorescing beings.
Fish. Sea turtle. Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's talk about how does a sea turtle, her biofluorescence different than the coral reef?
Well, in the coral reef, there's this like really famous protein.
It's so famous.
It's like, yes, it's the rock star. I got so into this protein, I wrote a book on it as a graduate student, like A Glow in the Dark, the revolutionary science of fluorescence, the revolutionary science of biofluorescence. So it was famous in very small subculture worlds. And it was famous because they found it in a jellyfish. And they noticed that it was like, if you take the 238 amino acid, that code for that, and you could put it in any other animal and it would then make a fluorescent protein too. So it was like gene expression. You can see it.
Yeah.
It was like several Nobel Prizes have come out for this, even what was it, like 2008 chemistry, and just for the discovery of it. But now it's been used, and like we understand how scent works now. It's been like the one of the biggest rock star tools in biomolecular science.
Yeah, that's so cool. Something that is really important to your science, and something I really appreciate, David, is your desire to not just observe other creatures and beings at a distance, but to really kind of know their world and try to understand how they perceive their world. So tell us about the shark device to see like a shark. What was that like?
So we found fluorescence in a few species of sharks. And it was like...
And what is this? What do you mean found? Like you see a shark, or what's the process of discovering species with biofluorescence?
It was a whole crew of us that were working. So it took I had a really core group of collaborators when I was working in this area. I was working with Vincent Pierrebonne, who he was at the Yale School of Medicine, and he was using fluorescence in his neuroscience work. And he was also using it to study the brains in rodents, of doing neuroscience work, a lot of neuroscience done there. So he was used to making his own equipment. And he had a machine shop that we used at Yale to kind of make this equipment. And then once we found it in eels, we teamed up with John Sparks, who's a curator of ichthyology at the American Museum of Natural History. And it was kind of like we were a trio, and we went around the world, and we went to the South Pacific, and that's where we started to find many different species. And we found that it was mainly in these like cryptic species, like clopsid eels. Cowapictes hydroporoides is like bright, an incredible amount of fluorescence. So then we had this equipment, and it was like equipment that would give off bright blue, perfectly spectral light underwater. So we would swim with this and just look for things. And so a lot of it was just looking around. And then we encountered 2 sharks that have this.
So you confronted the sharks finally.
Yes.
Okay, what was that like?
Well, 2 things that are there's a little piece. Not everything was found by going to nature. We then started to like peek around in aquariums at night. And because aquariums would just have like all these different species, and we would like wait until nighttime and go around and turn off all the lights in the aquarium. Especially the Mystic Aquarium was amazing. They work with us. And we then found actually the species of shark in the Mystic Aquarium.
Oh, cool.
Which then were like, because especially one of them is like a really deep sea shark that was even beyond where.
What's the name?
There's the chain cat shark. There's the chain cat shark, which is small. You can fit them like on your palm of your hand. They're really...
that sounds docile enough. That sounds good.
Yes. And then there's the swell shark, and that was living off the coast of California. And there, like, meanwhile, Scripps Institute of Oceanography is right there. There's the Scripps Canyon right off the coast. And there's swell sharks all hanging out in the canyon, but they're very like well disguised because they kind of blend in and they're not very interesting. So there's very few studies on swell sharks. And they call them the swell shark because when like a bigger shark tries to eat them, they'll swell up, they'll gobble up a bunch more water, and they turn around and like then bite their tail. So they make themselves like an inner tube, and that apparently makes them hard to eat. So now it was like, I liked it because it was an underdog shark too. Like, the fact that no one cared about it made me want to care about it more too. Cause like, everyone's like, oh, great white, hammerhead, the charismatic sharks. Like this was like a kind of dull looking small shark that's a bad swimmer that doesn't eat things, and it's not on Shark Week. Well, I brought it on Shark Week.
Hell yeah.
But I just like the fact that like, why is it that humans why do we love just like these charismatic animals? And like, there's 1,200 species of elasmobranch, and like Shark Week focuses on like 3 of them most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But now the question was how does that shark see? What do we know about the shark? So there's like no science on the shark. So we had to first take the shark to an eye doctor, study the visions in its eye, like same thing like a human eye. Like if I was to look at your eye, I would see that you have like red, green, blue cones, and you don't have that. There's rods and cones. Cones are more for color, and rods are more for light sensitivity. And I would say that, okay, you can see within these wavelengths of our star, but you're likely not a good at night seer. Because I could see that like the size of your rods wouldn't be as impressive as this like swell shark's rods, which would showing me that it's a very good dim light seer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can get these first order approximations of like who you are just by looking at the apparatus in your eye. And we did the same thing to the shark. Like we saw that it only had one pigment in its eye, but it was a very like tremendous rods in them. And that was indicative of something that could see very good in very dim light.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see that this shark was seeing very good at like 1% light. And it was only seeing right at the blue-green interface. That's like, it's like black and white, but it was like blue-green was how the shark sees. So now already we know a lot about the shark's world. And then I took a camera and I turned it into, I called it the shark eye camera, by modifying it to see just this one color, and then swam with the shark and did modeling and was able to show that fluorescent sharks could see each other a lot more than they could see a non-fluorescent object.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a fluorescent shark, you're looking at another fluorescent shark, you're going to be able to see that is going to be a lot brighter to your eyeball.
Right. Just imagining all these undersea creatures being like, oh my God, who is this guy following us everywhere?
Yeah, they were probably annoyed. I feel that sometimes. Like sometimes, like I even felt that when I found the fluorescent turtle.
Yeah.
That after a while, the turtle like didn't want to be. Like you can really feel when an animal doesn't want to be. Like and we just usually at that point just let it go swim away.
Yeah. So the shark eye camera.
Mm-hmm.
What did you learn about pretending to be a shark?
I think the key thing was, by spending this time to try to see the world from the shark's point of view, new insights came about. Like it was the effort. And I found that interesting with like many animals, like we don't know even what their eyes or their senses are. We look at other things, but like it felt like it was an important step of getting to know the shark, because it's like now I know a little bit more about how the shark sees the world. And now even doing this with others, like all these new things emerge. Like when you see that and you notice that they can see each other, then parts of their behavior start making sense.
Like what?
Like, for instance, when we found a fluorescent turtle and we looked at their eyes, we would see that when a fluorescent turtle is around a shark, which might try to eat them, they'll freeze. Because the shark doesn't have good kind of like
motion detection?
Yeah, it doesn't see that clear, but it sees motion very well. So like a good defense for someone whose vision is like that would be just to not move, because then you're more invisible.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you kind of then understand the predator prey and like how their eyeballs are working, then you can see like these kinds of types of defenses that have been going on for like, millions of years actually have their reasons in like the way that the predator is built.
What's the evolutionary story of whales? They're so intriguing to humans, I think, in part because we shared an ancestor. So what's like the whale story of evolution?
Whale evolution is pretty darn cool. In the books, they call it the poster child of macroevolution. Is the story of whales, because life originated in the ocean and came onto land, reptiles, mammals. But then there's this group of mammals that went back into the water. So it's like we never went back in as humans, but there's this group of relatives that like, whether they were chased back in or, well, there's ancient whales, which like the oldest one or the oldest one we know is called Pachycetus from Pakistan. And they're related to like hippos. So you can almost think of hippos in one sense of like semi-aquatic, right? They're like half in the water and half out, but they're not whales. So you have ancient whales. Then the story of modern whales kind of jumps to like 35-ish million years ago, where you split between the ones that have teeth, like dolphins and sperm whales, and then the ones that have baleen, like the humpback whale. So they kind of split off, and you have called them mysticetes, which are the baleen ones, and the ones that have teeth are called odontocytes. And there's more species of toothed whales than there are of I think there's about 94 species of whale. And the sperm whales are really interesting because they're very different than the others. And now I feel like they're a lot like humans in one sense, where there used to be other homos around, like Homo erectus and Homo neanderthals, but now we're the last one remaining.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a similarity. They're Pfister macrocephalus. And so they're the only one in their genus, the Pfister. And they're quite different than the others. So I actually, I always like the weirder animals. So I never thought I would be so into whales. But like, I mean, the sperm whale, like now, and even spending time with them, like they're the closest thing of all the animals I've studied that are just magic, like just magic. Yeah. And the mysteries that are still out there are like, I know that our understanding of this just beautiful animal are like at the very early stages too.
Mm-hmm. Is this because of one feature that they have is this spermaceti? Is that how you say it?
Spermaceti oil, yeah.
Yeah, spermaceti oil, which humans drove these whales almost to the point of extinction for this oil. And it was only many, many, many decades later that marine biologists and scientists were realizing that it plays a crucial part in their acoustic sense of the world and their communication. So can you tell us about this really cool organ?
Yeah, they have a huge head. Their head could be like a third of their body,
mm-hmm.
and it's filled with the spermaceti oil there's a lot of complexity going on in this. There's the spermaceti oil, but then there's also other features in there. So the way that it's hypothesized, and we don't even know for sure how they exactly make their sound yet, but it's called the bent horn hypothesis. And well, it's even interesting how their nose, because of the evolution becoming whales, like, the nose rolled over their head and became a blowhole, and their skin is gotten thick. Like if you're in the bathtub for a long time, like your skin starts sloughing, right? So whales had to figure out how to like their skin, could be in the salt water for all the time.
Yeah. And
then their lung capacity to be able to dive nearly a mile to get their food in there. So just so much like interesting modifications, even not needing fresh water anymore for a mammal. They're getting their fresh water from their food. So they're no longer drinking fresh water. Just massive amount of like extreme modifications for you to be a deep sea living. You're essentially a deep sea creature if you're a sperm whale, who are spending more time at 800 meters than you are at the surface. And the oil, the bent horn is like, so one blowhole is much bigger. It's like almost like one nostril got bigger than the other. So the blowhole became like the big nostril, and it is asymmetrical to the head. So then they have like a smaller nostril. And they're moving the air in like a funnel.
Oh, really?
But getting at how sperm whales make sound, they do this thing called the bent horn, where they snap some air through this funnel. It goes through the oil, which kind of magnifies the sound. And then it bounces off the back of the head. And then it goes through, the whalers call it the junk, which is these series of like waxes that could localize the sound. So it could be very, very localized for localizing like a small fish, or it could be for, just go out very wide. And there could be, I think, around 2,000 liters of this oil in their head. And yeah, this oil was the first industrial revolution. Like, this was before it was learned that you could crack oil and dig up coal. This was like a major form of energy and commodity. And like you said, it nearly drove the sperm whales to extinction. With the Yankee whaler fleet. This is Moby Dick. Yeah, very kind of tragic story of people going around the world on boats just to kill this animal. And then I think one of the saddest things that I found is like the fact that we know now how social they are and how important their family is, and their 18 months gestation for a new sperm whale. So a lot of the times they would actually first go after like a baby in the group, and then they won't leave a wounded baby behind. So the entire unit would keep coming after the boat to try to help the baby. And they figured out that if they actually didn't kill it and they just wounded it, that they can collect all the whales. So they would use the fact that these are such social creatures that have 35 million years of sociality behind them, and the importance of their relationality to each other, to use that like against them to pull them out of the water.
That's so tragic, and that's very sad. Now that we know so much more about sperm whales and lots of other whales too, exactly as you said, we've come to see them as social beings, perhaps even with the trappings of what we call a culture, something that I think was so fundamental in transforming whales in the minds of humans, and thinking about them empathetically, was a researcher a generation ago who was really involved with you and made a big impact, who framed blue whale communication as a kind of song. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah. They call whales like the sirens of the sea, because people that had wooden boats would hear, the moans of the songs of humpback whales and would resonate. It wasn't really even known that they were making any sounds, but I had been working at the Navy and I kind of noted all these like sounds of marine mammals. And then it was because of this wartime effort of listening for submarines, that some of these recordings had worked their way to a researcher, Roger Payne. And upon like listening to them and noting, and along with Katie Payne, who had a cello and a musical background, they were able to kind of relate this to song, and wrote a paper called Songs of the Humpback Whale that was published in Science.
What year?
With McVeigh and Payne, that was 1970 or 71. I think it's 70. Songs of the Humpback Whale was on the cover, showing the repeat, like between 20 and 30 minutes, they would repeat the song. And it was just this beautiful study of like simple, like whales sing. And Roger, who now became, when I formed the project, he was instrumental. But Roger, once he published this article, he also wanted to make an album. And he like found a friend of his that was like, did like academics, like print. And he was like, would you make a record for me? And he printed the first record of Songs of the Humpback Whale. And then he went around to like every radio station and be like, would you be interested in whale songs? And like, just kind of like became like the Pied Piper of like, everybody check it out, whales sing. And kind of like got it on Star Trek. It's in the Golden Record. It was in a floppy disk in National Geographic in 1979. It just became like the anthem of a generation, like the Songs of the Humpback Whale. It led to the Save the Whale movement. It led to the formation of the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So like you could almost say that this finding that whales sing saved several whale species from going extinct.
My parents had it on a like a little cassette tape, and I just remember listening to it as a kid. And the word song makes so much sense. So can you describe how you hear songs of the whale? They sound elegiac, or they have kind of a shape to them that is familiar to humans listening to human-made music.
It is. It's haunting.
It's haunting.
It's haunting. It's and that was a bad. But I tried to.
It was like what?
Roger used to do this better than me. But I think there's something about the freak. It's at a frequency that humans find amenable.
Yeah.
If you think of like the word mother, is that good? Like we like certain frequencies more than others. And like we find them relaxing and soothing. And the humpback whale frequency just happens to cut like right into the human heart. Whereas now that I'm looking at sperm whale sounds, like they don't. They sound like a jackhammer, and like
do the jackhammer.
Like I've learned to love it now because I know it, but it's like maybe, I would like to say like some people love techno. So it's just a matter of taste. Like I think sperm whale music is like an acquired different taste, and it doesn't have that ability that the humpback whale sounds do, where you can like play it and everyone closes their eyes and lets it like wash all over them. But when I was working with Joan Jonas, an artist, on a piece, she didn't want to work with the humpback whale sounds because she felt like it had already become like cultural wallpaper, and it had been overplayed. So it didn't have an effect anymore because like we've all heard those songs too many times, and that it didn't really speak to her artistic brain anymore, and wanted, like the weirdness of the sperm whale.
Yeah. I didn't know that Katie Payne was a cellist, and it makes so much sense because the cello is the instrument most like not just the human body and the ability to produce a range of frequencies that humans can also sing.
Yeah. Katie's amazing too, and like I think Roger unfortunately didn't give her the credit she deserved back in now, and I think in his later years he really tried to correct that. But she also went on and made an incredible discovery with elephants. But it was this background in whale acoustics that led to elephants communicating in the ultrasonic frequencies, picking it up through their feet.
So the instruments that Payne was using to record these songs, it's obviously technology has become a lot more sophisticated in the decades since. So can you talk about how you eavesdrop on whales?
Thinking to like whale biology as a field like that someone could get paid to study doesn't go back that far. Like Roger's era is like one of the first he's almost like a grandfather to our lead whale biologist too, of humans that would go out into the water with like various types of listening gear and put it in the water and listen. Like the songs of the humpback whale actually he didn't record himself. He got that from the undersea cables. Mm-hmm. But now it's like, now that we know it, we're now starting to study it. So you have a hydrophone, which is basically a microphone like this that is cased in waterproofing that you could hang underwater, and you put your headphones on and you could, whales, especially the humpback whales, they travel long distances. So even if those whales are very far away, you could be hearing them through your headphones, and sound travels 5.5 times faster underwater. So thinking of this early marine mammal scientists were like waiting for the whale to surface. When they fluke, you see what tail it is. You see their fluke, so you can now identify which whale it was. You could start to like take a picture of it and notice it's whale A, B, C, and you could hear the sounds. You could start correlating what you're hearing from this one microphone dangling over the boat with that whale there. And it was very descriptive. And a student that worked with Roger was Hal Whitehead, who's now trained our lead biologist, Shane Garrow, our whale biologist. And Hal Whitehead had a PhD in statistics. And early whale science was very much statistical, right? You're out in the water waiting and having this brief encounter. You see a whale, you hear a little bit of recordings, you have one or two pictures of, of different flukes, and you're trying to make so my hat goes off to how hard this science is. And you're getting seasick and you're thrown around, and Hal got his own boat called Balena, and he had all his students on his boat. And so you needed the sailing ability and have this technical equipment and have the statistical knowledge to make sense out of these scant observations to piece together pieces so Shane Garrow showed that whales have specific accents, regional accents. Even though there's different clans of whales, they'll have slightly different accents, even in the same areas.
So accent is a human word.
Yep.
Why do you apply it to whale communication?
Say you're there's a one whale click that they make a lot in Dominica. It's click, 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 right? So you hear that, and then you hear another that it's they're doing a slightly different variation. That's just that one is going to be doing. So even though they're living together, one group has you could totally tell them apart just by how they're using their codas. So there's an accent's just a word, but you're able to differentiate groups of whales based on their sounds. So we're starting with that point. We went into this project, and the reason I'm skipping a lot of how Project SETI started, but
SETI is
Project SETI is the Cetacean Translation Initiative, and it's the nonprofit that I'm running that started in 2020 that is working to decode the communication system of sperm whales. And let me back out a little bit because there's a bunch of backstory that you need to say before jumping down. One thing, it was 1957 that they knew sperm whales there was an article in Nature that sperm whales vocalize. So I feel this doesn't go back that far. 1957, sperm whales actually vocalize. They didn't even know they made any sounds, right? Then it came up later that these are actually codas and described. And then Shane Garrow, our lead biologist, work showing that there's regional dialects among that. And then that's kind of where it was when we started the project. But now SETI has 50 scientists now across, I think, 7 or 8 different disciplines. And we're marine biologists, but we're also roboticists, people from the machine learning expertise, natural language expertise, cryptography, and network science and linguistics, all coming together, looking at sperm whale vocalizations. So everyone had to get up to speed. Everyone had to become almost a mini expert on sperm whales before the project could even start. And for instance, Jacob Andreas, he's a professor at MIT in natural language processing, really started to see this from an NLP lens and kind of was able to draw from his expertise. And that, along with Pratyusha Sharma, a graduate student, they were instrumental in showing that there's an alphabet, a phonetic alphabet, the different types of sounds that sperm whales can make. And they use musical elements there, they use tempo, rubato, rhythm, and another piece called an ornamentation.
And rubato is the slowing, the stretching out of a coda. Yeah.
Basically these musical pieces, but if you isolate them out of the different ways that whales can vocalize using these different types of elements. So it showed, rather than there just being a coda click, say in Dominica, where they're constantly they call it the 113, you would just call that, there's the 113 coda. But
what is that?
Click, 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 click. But maybe there could be click, 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 or click, 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 click. Or there could be click, 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 an extra click. That's an ornament. And so there was just able to kind of show that there's a lot more complexity beyond that. And I think there was also another component to that, is that they were showing that these would vary both contextually based on the context of what they're saying, and they could also stitch them together combinatorially, Like I went to the store, and then I went to the market, and then I came to this podcast. And then after that, I went to have a dinner and just continue on and on. To be able to show that kind of brings their communication system closer to language. And language is a word that we construct based around our own communication system than other animals. It was actually at a conference that we hold at the Simons Institute of the Theory of Computing, where we brought Joyce Poole and Mickey Pardo, who had just showed that elephants have names. Was in it. He was noticing timing. Like an elephant might say something to another elephant, but it'll be like, and then like 15 minutes later, the other elephant will respond. And we're used to being humans. We're like, I talk, Claire talks. I talk, Claire talks. And it's kind of rude if we talk on top of each other. Like that would be like, oh, that's aggressive. I'm talking right on top of you. Like you waiting for me to talk, or else that would be like a cultural thing that we do. But anyway, there's all these ways of like, imagine if I said something, this would be a really boring podcast. If like 15 minutes later, we're just like looking, and then you'd be like, good thought. But the spacing and the timing kind of triggered in Gasper's head that like, oh, maybe it's about timing. So he was able to take away the negative space, and suddenly he started to see what looked like vowel-like features, like e, that were appearing, and then kind of went through a lot of work to show that these aren't just like features of their, of their sound making system, that they're actually being used. So in one sense, if you're looking at a foreign communication system, you have to understand the fundamentals of it before you could then begin stitching the meaning together. So I think at this stage now, we're like seeing how vast their communication system is and seeing how rich. And we're beginning in the next year, we're going to be, there's a basics of a language model that could be predictive on vocalizations, being able to predict behaviors.
Can I read something to you?
Yeah, sure. Please do.
Okay. So this is from Vladimir Nabokov, and he had these 3 requirements for a translator.
Okay.
And he's quite crabby in this article, which is pretty funny. First, the translator must have as much talent, or at least the same kind of talent, as the author he chooses.
That's good.
What do you think about your work with whales? Do you think that applies? You think you could put on a talent show with a whale?
No, I mean, I think it's like, I always felt when I read Nabokov that like, I realized I could never be a writer at that moment, because it was like, it wasn't even English, wasn't even his first language. And he was so much better at putting things into words than I could ever imagine to be. But anyway, back to that. What I think is interesting about that is that first, he's such a talented translator, and Russian's his first language, and he's writing books in English that are like some of the greatest books of all time. So yeah, one, I think he's probably his ego is tremendous. And so you're smelling his ego that's being crabby. And,
no, I love it. I love the crabbiness.
Yeah. And the idea being is that like you would have to be almost as good of a writer than of the person you're translating, or else you're going to poorly translate it. And we've all read bad translations. So I think that's a kind of interesting thing. And I guess what I find interesting is that like from our team, like I'm really into domain expertise, and I don't have language expertise, right? I'm not a linguist and I'm not a natural language processor, but the people on our team are that, and they're talented. So I think like Roger Payne said to us at one of these early conferences that we held at Radcliffe before the formation of Project SETI, was an exploratory workshop, and Kevin Ryan, the chair of the Harvard Linguistics Department, gave a talk on how he would approach bringing linguistic into studying sperm whale communication. And everybody was like blown away, because it was exactly what we needed to hear. And Roger said, I can't believe I went my whole career without working with linguists. So I think for that sense of like we're translating, it's not like there's one translator. We're a collective. But I do think that like having really people that are talented in their subfield of communication or language are helping patterns of communication system emerge. But once we see them emerge, then you can't unsee them. Like once you see the waggle dance of the bee, you can't unsee that. It's like now we all know that. So now that gets then brought into our human understanding of the other. So I think that's like one of the things that I feel most like proud of is that we've added whatever something to our understanding of sperm whales at the moment, and we're still just getting started. But anyway, I agree with that. In some, I guess I agree with some parts of it that the humans are more powerful at this moment at translating than the machine. You can't just take AI and throw it at sperm whale sounds and think that the AI is going to just figure it out. Like you need the humans with these various expertise to actually like find the fundamentals that then you could teach the machine.
The second requirement. He must know thoroughly the two nations and the two languages involved and be perfectly acquainted with all the details relating to his author's manner and methods.
That I think I'll have to disagree with because we not that I disagree, but in this instance, we can't be there. He's talking of Homo sapien to Homo sapien, and a human with a different language, you're still a human. So that's all possible. But now we're dealing with an animal that's not only a different species, but has evolved very differently, and their communication system is underwater, and they're clicking, and they're. So I don't think. Well, I think in a perfect world, you'd want that. It's unfortunately not possible here. So we have to go second best.
Third requirement. While having genius and knowledge, which you do, he must possess the gift of mimicry and be able to act, as it were, the real author's part by impersonating his tricks of demeanor and speech, his ways and his mind, with the utmost degree of verisimilitude.
So what is he really saying there? We break this down into like
Inhabit, to inhabit their being, to know. This is what anthropologists call saturation. When
Right.
you're in a field with another culture, group of humans, you can start to predict and guess what they're going to do. If you do this, if I do this, then you do this.
I'd say it is important. I think if I'm coming into the project, like especially because we started in the pandemic, so it took a while for everybody on the team to actually see a whale. And I think it's interesting sometimes because people are translating who've never seen the whale and just hearing stories and listening to clicks. And sometimes they would just come up with these outrageous things but the more and more time that then you put this person underwater with a whale, like then they're like, oh wait, made it that idea was ridiculous. So I think the more time, and I noticed that the more time I spent with the blue striped grunts, that like the more time, like even think of a human and your dog, like the more time you spend with your dog, the more you'll know and be attuned to like little nuances. So it really does help to just spend a lot of time with the subject. And the subject here is whales. And sometimes it's hard because this is the tragic thing. I felt this sense of like, I was with the sperm whale. We were at the surface. The whale, we were looking at each other and the whale scanned me. And then the whale dove and I could see it like disappear out of sight. And I knew it was going to be another hour until that whale comes to the surface again for another breath. And I think this sense of like, I'll never know what it's like to be that whale. Like it could come to the surface and be with me for that second, but then it's going down and I don't know, it's hunting or doing things or how it's seeing down there. So I'm still so far from being able, like, and it was just a sense of loneliness. It was like an existential loneliness of like, I don't think I'll ever really know, like I'll maybe know how they're communicating at the surface, but that there's just so much mysteries and So I could think about it. I want to put a camera on it with an IR light so we can see. Because even like the technology of peering into the whale as it's a mile underwater, like it's just challenging, So just the technical challenges of like being with the whale now, because I could be with it at the surface, but I can't be with it underwater. So now I have to kind of use instruments and robotics or listening or to be able to kind of be with it a mile down. And I think that's actually an interesting point because Roger always he had this idea of like designing a device that would like allow him to be on the back of the whale, which, we disagreed on like some parts of how to study whales. And, but anyway, this idea of like, wanting to be with it but it really just not being possible.
You guys are working on that though, right? A technology that could dive with the whale?
We are working on gliders, but I mean, just like I said, the power of eyes and observations, like that's the root of all science. So I think the fact that it's almost, I don't know, in my lifetime, if I'll be able to like be with a whale underwater a mile down. So we're using secondary ways. Yeah, we are designing equipment. We have robots. We have all kinds of ways. We're actually trying to reconstruct like what echolocation would be like, because so much of their brain has evolved to hear echoes and to possibly make, like trying to describe vision. Like imagine trying to describe, like I open my eye and the second I open it, all of a sudden I could see all these images of like what's actually in the room. And like to kind of describe, well, a whale is like sending sound out of their head and the sound is coming back and kind of going into their jaw, but likely they're forming as rich of a world as our vision is through sound. And how can we start to get at that? Like, what's the closest we can get humanly to echolocation? And I think we can. There's lots of senses that we can imagine that we don't have the capability of. Like we could sort of imagine what it's like to echolocate, but we can't do it ourselves.
So the Thomas Nagel's argument that there is this absolute barrier between different phenomenologies, he claims that, well, his famous philosophical question is, can we know what it's like to be a bat? And he says, he has a resounding no. And language is a vehicle for culture, for ethics, for morals. And something I so appreciate, having learned from you and Project SETI, is how this process of translation is really lumpy and it's really sticky and it can be really alien. There's no such thing as a one-to-one translation, even between human languages. And I have learned from you all that stickiness is really something to embrace and to celebrate, because we might never know the depth of the cultural resonance of that kind of sperm whale vocalization.
Yeah, I agree. It's cool. I mean, it's what makes humans human, right? Is that we're so curious and we make art and we write books and we're always like, asking questions, and we live on this world and there's a star, and then, how did that star come about? And like, how did these first plants come about? And how did the whale come about? And like, we're just these kind of newcomers. So I think in one sense we could be really down on humans right now because like we feel like sometimes we're making a mess out of things. But at the same time, it's that I think that's what drives me in this project, though. It's this idea that like we can do the most beautiful things and the most gruesome things. And we just come from these old world primates, and we have these incisors in our mouths that are meant to like rip up flesh, and but it's all messy, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a real lesson from sperm whales, from like how they work in collectives and how they can travel across the ocean, and like all the possibilities of their culture that we don't know, and that these huge brains possibly evolved over many more millions of years than we've been human. And I love the idea of thinking out of like a life on other planets, but it's like, this is life right here that's like sitting in front of us, and there's still a couple 100,000 sperm whales that are still remaining that didn't, get killed or aren't getting damaged due to some things that are happening in the ocean.
Okay, so computational techniques that humans have only developed in the last handful of decades, that can process so much information so quickly, are now tools being used to do this translation work of whales. Can you tell me about how machine learning algorithms are kind of making you have insights about whale communication that you wouldn't have had otherwise?
I think whenever I think about machine learning, I think it's getting really good. It is really good at finding patterns. And then I guess another way to think about it is multidimensional space, which is a very hard thing to talk about. But like you could easily, we live in 3 dimensions, right? But you could imagine like 4 dimensions or 5 dimensions or 6 dimensions. So when you feed lots of data and it's looking for patterns among multi-dimensions, it could start seeing patterns. And the more computation power you throw at it, the better and better. And the more data you could throw at it, and the more patterns it could find, right? And the more data you have, the better it's getting. And the other thing is like thinking of displacement, like a certain word, like you'll say, a classic example is like, what are 2 words that are often paired together?
Green grass.
Yeah, or like a one would be like man and king, something like that. Like, these words would be sort of closer together. You could begin to predict next words, like, oh, because I've seen all these words, so I could say with like predictive accuracy that this is going to be the next. If you've had these words, then this word is going to come next. And that, I think, kind of just got to a point where humans are like, wow, it could like, finish sentences and write things based on these. So those are 2 areas. And in one sense, if I have a bunch of information on whale clicks, and what you sometimes do is you'll train it on, say I have 1,000 whale clicks, and I'll train it on 700 of them, and then I'll save 300 that I actually already know what they're going to happen in those 300, but I'll train it on the 700, and then I'll be like, all right, now predict the next 300. And then I'll be able to be like, oh, it got like 20% right. So why wasn't it not good? Or was it bad? But then you'll throw different things at it, and then you'll get it to go better and better. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, whatever's happening now, it's predicting the next things with like 99% accuracy. So how does this relate to whale communication? The whale vocalizations compared to human vocalizations, there's a huge valley, massive valley. Like we're only in the like 100,000s compared to the trillions of tokens. So we're at it just shows where we're invested as a species. We're invested in ourselves. And even now, you'll find things like hallucinations. So it will get improper translations, or the model will start hallucinating. So I think the challenges that we're up against, one, we're not selling anything to the whale. So because we're selling things to each other and there's a market against predicting things and coming up with apps that sell things, like there's a lot of huge brains going into AI for humans. But the amount of human brain power that's going into like understand whales or elephants is, unfortunately, our society hasn't put a financial importance on it yet. So there's not that much. Mm-hmm. So in one sense, the AI is useful for us, but I don't think we've really harnessed its power yet, because we don't have the massive data sets where it's going to get really powerful. So I'm optimistic that like we're finding the basic tenets of the communication system, and we don't even have big data yet. So it's going to get really interesting and really cool. And I think my hope is that it's in a connective way. That's just like, I think, getting back to what you said about humans, like we want to like walk around on the moon, and we want to like send a rover to Mars. Like we want to know what a whale's saying. Like it's part of the beautiful thing about humans that make us human, that we just care about these things. And then we just pass it from generation to generation. Like Roger spent his whole life on it, and then kind of passed it to us. And then I don't think I'm going to get to the end of this by the end of my life. So then there's going to be another generation that just takes this and moves from there. So I don't know. It's just kind of poetic of the whole cycle.
What would it take to engender a paradigm shift toward whale translation?
You could view the whale as an extraterrestrial. Like, this is real world arrival or ET. Like, just pose the hypothetical of encountering intelligent life. Imagine we didn't have whales here on our planet and we're out like 5 light years away, and you find a new planet and it's got an ocean and it's got whales on it and they're vocalizing. Like, how would you go about translating that? If we can't do it here, even though they're hard, then we're really going to be hopeless, like doing it 5 light years away with like through a robot. So I think it'll be interesting to see how far we can push this of translating a non-human communication system. Like, how far can we get? And then once we get to that point where there's like, we could even test it and we're sure our model's not hallucinating. But then would you be able to do this in another galaxy? And we know that where there's 10 to the 30 stars, so there's likely another star out there with a habitable planet with life that we could eventually someday find some kind of alien life, non-DNA or DNA-based, whatever it is, that we'd want to then have some understanding of how they're communicating. So I think where do you think of all this? Like, where do you want it to go?
I'm fascinated by the long history of SETI with an S and how it relates to Project SETI with a C. So SETI with an S is the search for extraterrestrial communication intelligence. And there's a 1959 paper in Nature about how one would even begin to understand a communique from an alien intelligence. That paper was foundational. It gave scientists the mandate to take the science seriously. And just the next year at the Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia, Frank Drake, who was a pioneer of modern SETI with an S, he brought together a whole cast of characters. I think Minsky
the Order
was
of the
there.
Dolphins?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was very inspired by John C. Lilly, who was a kind of jack of all trades person, very much part of the 1970s, 60s, and 70s culture, let's say. And he's worth revisiting. His archives all of his papers just got to Stanford. And I've been just like hanging out with John Lilly.
A new movie that came out on them too. Yeah. Michael made it,
Yeah. And he proposed to this group of eminent radio astronomers and physicists that cetaceans, dolphins especially, were the perfect proxy alien being by which to understand the process of beginning to perhaps translate extraterrestrial intelligent communication. So these two fields have always, they evolved together since the 1960s. There are, of course, these wonderful metaphors as like the ocean as the alien ocean, or space as an ocean, and a lot of information theory really applies to both sets of inquiry. So in the vast ocean, as you know, information can really get lost, and even more so, whale communication at distances is really being curbed by an ocean that we've made a lot noisier with tankers, etc. If you apply that same principle to outer space communication, space is kind of busy too. There's the interstellar medium. There's all kinds of things that get in the way of a signal reaching it. So you'll like this. I love this. The word alien is from the Greek xeno, and xeno means stranger. A stranger, in the most ancient Greek sense, is someone who can be known. So there's a custom of Xenia where you had to welcome in the stranger who showed up at your door for a few reasons. The first one is that it was kind of this like religious insurance policy. This beggar in rags, like very well could be Athena or Zeus, and rain wrath upon your house if you didn't welcome them in. And the Greek gods are notoriously tricky and conniving and shape-shifting.
Yeah.
What?
You don't want to mess with them.
No, definitely not. So you welcome the stranger into your home.
Mm-hmm.
You would ply them with wine and give them a feast and a bath, hopefully. And then in exchange, they would tell you news of the outside land, of the foreign city that they came from, news from the outside world. And I really love the word alien for this reason. Both whales and extraterrestrials seem to be waiting at the doorstep, and we're about to welcome them in. And I really want to. And I hope one of those things really happens in our lifetimes.
Yeah, me too.
David, thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Claire.
Futurology is a Studio B and Waveland production with distribution from Realm. Our executive producers are Nicholas Berggruen, Nathan Gardells, Dawn Nakagawa, Nils Gilman, and Jason Hoke. Futurology is produced by Grant Slater, Alex Gardells, and Natalia Ramos. Our associate producer is Alyssa Mardini. Futurology's theme music was composed by Marcus Bagala. The show is mixed and mastered by Aaron Bastinelli. Special thanks to Heather Mason, Olivia De Rienzo, Carly Migliori, and Nick Goddard.